Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Barry Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. And I've got a special guest today in Jesus Valador. Jesus is the one of the key geological people for the Vizsla Silver. And I'm really happy to have him on. Jesus, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Alan. Thank you for inviting me. It's really exciting to talk about Panuco.
Okay, well, Jesus, a lot of people know Mike Connort as the face of the company. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? What got you into the mining business and ultimately led you to Vizsla Silver?
Sure, of course. Well, I'm from Chihuahua, so I I studied the geological engineer in the University of Chihuahua. So it started some years before I even decided to go into geology, because my father worked for so many years for different junior exploration companies in Mexico as a field assistant. So I was always, exposed to rocks and minerals at home. So I got interested into that. And then until I got to a point that I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into geology and study geology. So I went and I got my bachelor on geological engineering from the University of Chihuahua. And then, after that, a few years after, I got my additional degrees, masters and PhD from first from University of Texas at El Paso, and then from New Mexico Tech in epithermal deposits. And essentially, I've been in the industry for over 25 years now. I started as a junior geologist working for Peñoles at the Torreon Exploration Office. First, as a logger in many projects as a junior geologist, and then I was assigned more responsibilities doing mapping, regional mapping, and some prospects, and then I continued moving up the ladder until I was promoted or assigned to manage or you know essentially manage or control a few small exploration projects. And then I continued developing my career in different companies. After Peñoles and Fresnillo, I went to and worked for 2 years with Hochschild Mining. And then then from Hochschild, I moved into First Majestic, where I worked for over 6 years there, in charge of all the exploration activities throughout the company. And then from Hochschild, then I moved into Fortuna, and then Outcrop Silver and Gold, another prospector junior company in Colombia. And then in until not until 2022 is when I decided to, or was invited to come to work for Vizsla Silver in early 2022. And I've been here with Vizsla, being part of this great successful company for over 3 years now.
Well, it sure is a success story, and I think it's still really early in its growth curve. Maybe it will be another Pinoles or Fresnillo.
Absolutely, definitely. The Panuco district has all the ingredients and all the right conditions to become one really, really big, high grade producing mine at some point.
So
It's
when
already a very good, you know, district with very impressive resources, but it'll be a tremendous mine.
so when you were working at with Pinoles and Fresnillo, did you work in the mine of in Fresnillo or
No, I'm always been exploration geologist, but I work on the Fresnillo district for a few years, for 3 years, over 3 years, maybe I cannot recall at this point. But yeah, I started working on Fresnillo at the Saucito project,
Saucito? Sí.
which is the discovery they made in the early 2000s south of the main Fresnillo mine.
Yeah.
So I got into that project when they had made already the discovery of the Saucito vein. I got there at this stage of the evaluation of the deposit, and then soon after I got started working in Saucito for Fresnillo. Actually, at the time it was Peñoles, wasn't Fresnillo who was doing the exploration. Then Peñoles got into a JV with Max Silver,
See,
and then I was put in charge of the Juanicipio project at the time on the
oh,
Peñoles side, of course. So
well, I have talked to Mike in the past, and I use that as a that region as an when I'm trying to explain to people how the clusters of epithermal veins and there was the cluster at the city of Fresnillo, and then they found Salcito not far away, and then they found Juanicipio not far away. So it's very interesting that I use that as an example all the time for districts of clusters of epithermal veins, and it's now very interesting to be able to talk to you, Jesus, because you actually worked on the projects that I use as an example.
yeah, no, and it's really, really interesting how these districts, form or operate. So these definitely these big districts, when you find a vein, you are gonna keep finding, and that this is what happened to Fresnillo. It, after some time they changed a little bit the paradigm, and then started making more discoveries, and then this is what ultimately is going to happen to Panuco, because
I agree.
once
That's
you
the
find that.
that's the one I use this analogy for to talk about is and before we get into Panuco, another interesting reason that I talk about Fresnillo in the context of epithermal vein clusters is because of Juanicipio being a blind veins.
Right.
And so that's another interesting element to, and parallel to Panuco, is that these are found, not only are they found in clusters, but sometimes it's the blind veins that are also very important. And so that's why I talk about those clusters and have talked to Michael Connert specifically about the parallels between the Fresnillo district and Panuco.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, that's right.
So what I'm thinking is, you guys had a great news release out today that really talked about what we're talking about right now. So why don't I share my screen, Jesus, and we can go into the news release and dig a little deeper, as I like to say.
Okay. Yeah, let's go
Okay,
ahead.
so can you see my screen now?
Yes, I see your screen.
Okay. So as you can read, folks, Vizsla Silver increases exploration, completes geophysical survey highlighting new targets proximal to Panuco Project 1 and commences initial field work at newly acquired Santa Fe property to the south of Panuco in the hunt for Project 2. Jesus, you might have Project Two on Panuco. Maybe this is three or four or something like that.
Correct, and that's something that we have been thinking. So this is not new. Something that this is something that we have talked about before, and of course, Vizsla is a well-financed company. That we have been very aggressive with new acquisitions, obviously, in what we foresee as a uh, uh, very proliferous San Dimas Panco corridor. We realize there's a lot of potential there in this structure. So we have been very aggressive with our acquisition strategy over there. And we are convinced that the area, Panuco in particular, but besides Panuco, the other properties that we have been acquiring have a lot of potential for not for additional projects, but for example, within Panuco, we are convinced that there's potential for additional centers of mineralization. And this is what we have been doing. This is what we keep drilling, persistently in the property, because we are convinced that eventually we are going to make the second discovery or another discovery of another epithermal center. we, with this agglomerate of veins, or this system of veins in the west, which is called the Panuco Copala main resource areas. There's a very important and very big mineralization, very high grade, and we believe that those veins develop on a hydrothermal center. But we are seeing evidences, with over time, through mapping, through alteration mapping analysis, and also with some argon geochronology, we define some at very high precision some ages of alteration and mineralization. What we are seeing is that there's uh, very likely that there were different hydrothermal events acting through time in the district, and this is what we are going to be targeting.
So, for my non-geologist out there that's watching this show, some of the stuff that Jesus is talking about is that when fluids that carry gold make interact with the country rock, it chemically alters that area, and that's what's called an alteration zone. And you know what causes that fluid to come up is the pressure and the temperature of where they come from. It brings those fluids up to the surface where it can alter those the country rock around it. So when you're looking a lot, sometimes in these veins, they will come right to surface. I live in the town of Zacatecas, Mexico, and you can actually see in the mountains where the veins come right through the surface. But sometimes they don't come to surface and they're blind veins. And so the way you go about looking for these things is to look for the alteration, and you look for certain chemistry, and that starts to tell you where you will look for the center of the system, if you will. Did I get that all right, Jesus?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Good, good. And I often talk about in the context of Panuco with the cluster in Fresnillo because it has that historical network of veins right at the city, and then years later, many years later, they looked and they found the Panuco district right beside it, and then not far from that was the Mag Silver, which was blind veins. And so, uh, you could fit a Fresnillo district or two in Panuco.
Absolutely. Yeah. Essentially, what we see in the western area of the project around Copala and Napoleon is outcropping veins. But we have, we have, talked about this before in other press releases. We have structural conditions that in the West in particular, we have a southwest dipping volcanics that are actually, at some point in the West, preventing the veins from reaching the surface. So we have Napoleon very well exposed to the north, but La Luisa is less exposed due to the tilting of the volcanics to the southwest.
Okay.
And something that we are realizing is that we have additional potential for blind veins to the west. So
Ah,
this is one condition that we are seeing now in Panuco, and the same repeats in the eastern side of the district, because what we have in Panuco is where we have at the center like a sort of uplifted block
okay.
of rock. It's essentially an intrusive mass, predominantly granodiorite, and on both sides of this granodiorite mass, we have two down drop blocks. And in these down drop blocks is where we have the most favorable conditions for these kind of blind veins.
Ah,
And
well,
and
that's
we are not trying to uh, invent anything here. What we are doing is exactly, or what we intend to do is exactly what we did at Juanicipio many years ago with Peñoles, is put a fence of drill holes to make discoveries, additional discoveries of live veins, and this is something we are already started in
That
Panuco as well.
that's very interesting because I actually ran a drill program. I was talking to you earlier about Ojo Caliente,
Right.
and there's actually only like two veins that come to the surface, and they're really small at the surface. And so when I got the project, my first question was, well, do they keep going at depth? And so I wanted to determine that. So we drilled some holes in there. And so as we were going to the vein, we hit another vein. And then we hit the main vein. And then they asked me, should we keep drilling? And I said, yeah, extend it for 50 meters and let's see what we see. And they kept drilling. And then they called me and they said, well, do you want us to keep going? I said, well, did you see any alteration? They said, yes, we did. I said, keep going. We
Yeah,
found, we ended up
exactly.
finding like 20 blind veins in that cluster. And so this makes me really excited when I heard about your I think the first mine is going to be into a blind vein that you hit when you were looking for another vein.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's sometimes how you find these things, folks, in Mexico or anywhere in the world when you're looking at a cluster, is you're looking for alteration at the surface and alteration with the truth machine, with your drilling. And when you find it, it can be magical, and it certainly is. And I think is it called Napoleon? Which is the vein that you found by accident?
It's Copala. That's Copala.
Copala.
We
Yeah.
were we were actually drilling for to explore Tajitos vein, which is a well-exposed vein on surface. And we were drilling this Tajitos vein, and along the way we hit Copala, which is the flat-lying, high-grade, almost 10 average, 10 meter true width on average. And yeah, no, it's an impressive vein, and we
Wow.
hit it by accident, while
Yeah.
drilling two tools.
Well, you can tell everybody it was on purpose, Jesus. I won't correct you.
Right.
You guys were so smart. But that's the nature of these clusters in Mexico. You find they're you just look and you're shooting for one vein and you find another.
Yeah, and I think something very important is that once you hit one high grade, thick vein, uh, then you start realizing you are into something important, into a proliferous district with clusters of veins. And once you understand that and you realize of that, you're gonna keep finding. So you gotta keep drilling, gotta keep trying.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, that's very exciting. I love hearing those kind of stories, Jesus, because as you know, great minds have been found that way. You know, they always have some interesting origin story. And so I love
Right.
hearing the origin stories of a project, and especially when it's something so fabulous as Copala.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the news release and we'll get to the quote that Michael made. And so they talk about preliminary results from HLEM survey covering Copala and Napoleon vein corridors, folks, not just the veins themselves, at their flagship Panuco Silver Gold District and outlines initial exploration plans to test the newly acquired producing Santa Fe property located south of Panuco in western Mexico. So Michael made a quote here, and I'll quote him: "As our development team continues to de-risk and advance Project One in the West, our exploration team, led by Dr. Jesus Velador, has been busy compiling and analyzing new data to locate additional mineralized centers across not only the original contiguous Panuco district, but within Vizsla Silver's newly acquired properties situated along the emerging western Mexico silver belt. Since our initial discovery at Napoleon, we have completed over 390,000 meters of diamond drilling, made several new discoveries, and outlined a robust high-grade resource base which serves as the foundation for Panuco Project 1, located in the southwest corner of the district. There'll be a map later, folks, and that's why I highlighted that. I'll go on quoting. We are now determined to identify the next epicenter of high grade mineralization with the potential to host similar resources to those outlined in Project 1. To support this objective, we have completed a new geophysical survey focused on the Copala and Napoleon vein corridors, highlighting several new surface anomalies. This, combined with results from ongoing mapping and sampling, observations of metal ratios, alteration, and other exploration methods, has improved our geological understanding of the structural controls to mineralization and has outlined several new high priority targets to enhance Project 1 and hunt for Project 2. End quote. So he delved into some really important stuff in that quote. One of them, why don't you talk a little bit to us about the epicenter? We touched on it a little bit already, but why don't you go into a little bit more about that, Jesus?
Yeah, yeah. This epicenter is the cluster of veins that make up the 98% of the global resource in Panuco project right now. It's an impressive resource and is the foundation for the PA that we put out last year, the preliminary economic analysis, and it's essentially a very very high grade system of veins, particularly on Copala, and overall what we have there in this epicenter is over 325 million ounces of silver equivalent in all categories of mineralization, in situ mineralization in this system of veins. So this is what we refer to as the epicenter, and as I mentioned, what we believe what is that this system of veins, this cluster of veins, has been developed by a big hydrothermal system or hydrothermal center in this portion of the Panuco area, the Panuco project. But there are good chances that we have additional centers like this operating, probably not at the same time at different times, but throughout the same region, throughout not only throughout Panuco, but also outside Panuco in other projects. And this
Right.
is why we keep acquiring land.
So we haven't really talked about it yet, but what you're describing there, there's also another important point, folks, is that um, what you want in these kind of systems, it's called a long-lived system. So what that means is the fluids they keep boiling up and making their way up, and you can actually see it in the drill core, and it almost looks like boiling water, if you will, in the drill core where it has these multi phases of the boiling that brings the metals, and so you've got more than one event happening that enriches the veins.
Right. No, that's a very good point, Alan. And I would like to add something for your audience, for your non-geologist audience, is that particularly in epithermal or hydrothermal deposits, the more the more pulses of hydrothermalism, or the longer that this hydrothermal system operates, the better. And also, if you have multiple pulses overlapping and operating over time and overlapping in the same area, the better, because every pulse or every hydrothermal event acting is going to contribute with some amount of metals depositing along the same, channel paths or structures, in this case is structures, which are fractures or faults in the rocks. And every time there's a new pulse of hydrothermalism, is going to contribute with a little bit of metals. And so the more events or the longer that the hydrothermal system operates in the area, is the better, and is what favors the formation of these, you know, world class deposits or districts.
And you can actually see it in the core, folks, and it's they call it textures, where it looks like you've got more textures. And actually, that picture in your background there is kind of is it an example of a multi-phased vein, Jesus?
It's trying to represent that exactly. That's something that my wife did for me. My
Yeah,
wife is a bit of an artist, and
yeah,
so I asked her to you know paint something for me, like trying to represent like a kind of crustiform banded vein.
right.
Yeah, that's exactly that.
So yes, folks, it's called banded textures. And basically what it means is it looks like you've got fluids having come in there multiple times. So one will be quartz, and then you'll get another event, and it bands up like his picture is showing there. So that's a good one, Jesus. I'm glad I picked up on it while I was ready to talk about that.
Thank you.
So then he goes on after he gets to the epicenter. Uh, he talks about geophysical survey focused on the Copala and Napoleon vein corridors. So, geophysics, when they're not really good at picking up a vein, but they are good at picking up structures. And you
Correct.
just described there how important those structures are to finding Copala, Napoleon, and other veins in the area. Can you expound on that a little bit for us, Jesus?
Yes, of course. And first, just to give you some context on this, the study that you're referring to is an HLEM survey, which is an electromagnetic survey, ground survey that we just completed on the Panuco project. And yes, essentially, what you measure with this instrument is the electromagnetic energy, you know, uh, electromagnetic currents or energy in the rocks, and particularly, as you mentioned, also these methods not always are good or the best to detect mineralization, but they are really good at detecting structures. And the structures is a very important component of any mineral deposit. You in addition to the hydrothermal fluids and the quartz and metals that we have been talking about, another very important ingredient, or probably equally important to the fluids, is the structural preparation. You have to have the permeability, you have to have the fractures that allow the fluids to go through, and this is where the open spaces where the metals and the veins get deposited. And these geophysical methods that we employ, and particularly the one that we employ here at Panuco, is good at detecting conductivity. So what we attempted is to find veins with significant amounts of sulfides that allow the electric current to flow through these
But in this case,
metal.
that's a little challenging, right? Because they're low sulfidation epithermal veins.
It
So that
is.
creates a bit of a challenge, if you will, when using geophysics.
Right. It is. It is. That's exactly right. But you have the advantage of using this geophysical information not only to detect the conductors. So if you happen to find a conductor, well, that's great. But you can also see where there's poor conductivity, and this is something that is going to tell you something about the structure as well. And
Ah,
we are seeing, for example, with this information that we just got, is that some of the veins, particularly along the Napoleon vein, we are seeing poor conductivity, which might be an indication of the low contents of sulfides, particularly closer to surface, and the presence or more abundant presence of quartz, which would be non-conductor. And this is something that we are going to employ and apply in other with other prospects, because what we did with this survey is to run first geophysical lines over Copala Napoleon, over known mineralization, over known high-grade mineralization,
Ah, to
to
get a
to see
signature.
to get the signature of these veins. And
Ah,
so, and we run the survey at variable frequencies. This is a frequency domain electromagnetic survey, and we did it over variable frequencies until the geophysicists determine the best frequency to pick up the anomalies, and
ah,
then they apply the same with the same instrument. Uh, they survey the other all parts of the area with other vein prospects uh, at the same
frequency.
frequency that they determine was the appropriate for to essentially, or the signature of the Napoleon and Copala.
So
And
in a
this is
way,
what we
you're
did.
kind of looking for the absence of something.
Right. Essentially, what we are looking is for the absence of conductivity. We
Ah,
we, we determine a few anomalies which are indicating good conductors near surface, but some others in the majority, particularly for Napoleon, we are seeing absence of conductivity
bien.
reflected by Napoleon.
So, folks, when we're talking about structures, basically what you're talking about are cracks in the earth. And the fluids, they need a path of least resistance, like water going down a hill or something like that. So when they're under pressure and they're released, they need a path to go on. And these structures are the cracks in the earth that enable those fluids to make their way up. Now, what's also interesting about that is that they can pinch and swell. This is called dilation, okay? And so where they swell, you can get a pooling of that fluids, which can make for a wonderful deposit of high grade material. And so that's why what Jesus is talking about is so important when you're looking and these various tools you use to try to identify those things.
Yeah,
Correct, Jesus?
that's exactly right.
Right?
And we did this survey, essentially this ground survey over Copala to get the signature, as we mentioned already, and also because to we wanted to test this particular method, because what we intend ultimately is to cover the whole district with a geophysical EM survey,
Right.
hopefully an airborne magnetic survey that is going to cover the whole district. But before we commit to doing to completing survey for the whole district, we wanted to understand really the method and see what we are going to be looking for.
So it's like you're fine tuning your tools based
Exactly.
on what you know is there, and then you can help you to find other things in not just on your property, but it could also be useful on the project to the south, Santa Fe, and the one to the north as well.
Right.
Right. Because folks, these if you have a cluster, it's not happening at a significantly different time, geological time. They're usually happening at the same time. So they will have these characteristics that Jesus was talking about dialing in on. They're very good. So, okay, then he goes on. Oh, he talks about the survey focused on the Kampala and Napoleon vein corridors. This is a very big distinction, folks, because you're not just looking for that one vein you're looking for an entire cluster in these corridors, correct, Jesus?
That's exactly right. And you know, if you looked into our previous or news releases from previous years, you'll see that there's not only one Copala and Napoleon vein. You know, on Copala you have at least three different displays on the foot wall, another one at the hanging wall. Then you have Tajitos on the west side, almost a subvertical vein, and along the Napoleon we have on the southern part we have a system of displays that, you know, essentially the vein is essentially horse tailing to the south, and has developed at least seven different displays on the hanging wall.
And that was really important at Ermitaño, which you mentioned, First Majestic,
Right.
when they found that. It's my understanding that that was a splay that they sampled and found very little at the surface, but they went down about 150 meters or so, and they hit about a half an ounce per ton of gold. Did am I correct on those things?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, this Ermitaño vein, what's one of the targets that, you know, Silvercrest, the former Silvercrest, had in the pipeline to be drilled. So they tested some of the other targets, and they didn't really found what they were looking for. So then they decided to to you know not continue with the exploration at Ermitaño, because the samples on surface were not indicative of
Just
something
really
meaningful.
low grade, yeah.
And when we, as First Majestic, when we acquired Silvercrest and the Ermitaño properties, we decided to follow up on some of these targets. So we revised what they left unexplored at the time, and we decided to drill Ermitaño, and that's what we found, like 150 meters under.
Oh, wow. And the reason I know that is because I followed Silvercrest Las Chispas very closely. But my good friend, we worked together at a geological consulting firm in Vancouver, his name is Paddy Nickel, and he runs Origin Royalties. And Origin Royalties vended the project to First Majestic. And so I've been following that. And it's amazing, you were talking about sort of the immediate area just around Copala.
Yeah,
And you're not even talking about the entire claim block. You're just talking about what you found immediately around Copala, and that's a similar story at Las Chispas, and then down to Ermitaño is this corridor, and how you can look at it on a microscopic level or a macro level on the overall project, and it's just wide open for You're still finding it right at the immediate area. That's
yeah,
amazing, Jesus.
yeah. No, it is. It is. And to give you some context, you know, with respect to the distance, you know, this 98% of the mineral resource of the 325 million ounce silver equivalent global resource in Panuco is just within approximately 2.5 kilometer radius, in a cluster of veins within that kind of radius.
And there
But
again is sorry.
yeah, but there are, you know, multiple veins throughout the district with indications of silver and gold mineralization that we have mapped.
And that's very similar to the cluster of veins at Fresnillo. There's about 20 of them that is about a kilometer, kilometer and a half by a kilometer and a half.
Mhm.
And then they didn't have to go very far to find the Saucito cluster. And
Exactly.
not very far from that to find the Juanicipio.
Right.
So I keep on making that parallel because I know that area well, but I keep hearing the similar story for Panuco, not just immediately what's around what you've already found and the ability to find more there, but then going out beyond the that core area to the east of your Copala Napoleon area to find more, and even following the corridor, north and south, I think it is,
Yeah,
to look for more in those corridors. That's amazing.
yeah, that's right.
So I'm going to go down here, and so the news release talks about 25,000 meters of exploration, 8,000 of it's completed so far, airborne EM survey on 1,000 at line kilometers at Panuco, advanced mapping of the district to 70% coverage, and generate near mine drilling targets at Santa Fe through detailed mapping and data. So that's some great information about what's upcoming, correct, Jesus?
Yeah, that's right. So as you mentioned, so we, what we allocated to for this for our exploration within Panuco for this year is 25,000 meters, of which we have drilled already 8,000 meters in different prospects, couple of prospects in the northeast. One of them resulted in the discovery of high grade at the Anima Zone in La Pipa. It's a press release that we put out early this year, and we continue testing targets. What we are testing now is on the west. It's a very interesting area, very compelling area at the intersection of the Copala, what we call the Copala Fault and Napoleon. So there's a convergence of two main structures that we think creates the very favorable structural conditions for additional deposits. And so we covered this with geophysics with the HLEM survey that you just mentioned, and we are drilling now different veins, because there are different veins, outcrops, and all mine workings around this area, and what we want is to find something meaningful in this convergence of a structure that may create uh, good structural conditions for mineral deposits. And with respect to the mapping, well, this
Oh, hold on.
70%.
Before we get into
Yeah,
the mapping, what Jesus is describing there, it kind of gives me goosebumps when he talks about it because so when I was describing earlier the cracks in the earth, okay, what that is called is rock preparation. Okay, we talk about that in geology all the time. So when you get a couple of those cracks that come together, now where they come together is even better rock preparation because you're not just dealing with one structure, you're dealing where two of them come together, and that's where everything can open up in what I call dilation zones. That's a technical word for where the rocks are opened and they can allow that fluid to come up. You've got to be very excited about drilling in that area, aren't you, Jesus?
yes, we are. Yeah, we are.
Does it give you goosebumps too?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so you were about, but before I interrupted you there, you were going to talk about mapping. Tell us
Yeah,
about that
I,
effort.
I was I was going to mention, just to clarify this point, is that we are advancing mapping of within the Panuco project. So we are at 70% mapping complete within Panuco. But we have a huge land package, including the other projects that we haven't really mapped in detail. What we started recently, because we see there's potential there as well. It's We started mapping at Santa Fe as well.
Okay.
And why we started mapping at Santa Fe at this point,
Let
instead
me
of
interrupt you again, Jesus.
yeah.
Tell my audience a little bit about what you're doing when you're mapping. What are you looking for there?
Yeah, good call. Thank you. So what we do when as a geologist, when you go out in the field to do geologic mapping, is essentially you walk over, over the mountains, over the hills. You carry your map sheets. You carry your field book, which is essentially a notebook where you make annotations, you carry your GPS, and now more recently, many geos, they use an iPad or a tablet to map on real time. What we map is that we look at the rocks because we as geologists, we can identify the different types of rocks by looking at them, looking, breaking the rocks with a hammer, and then looking at the sheep rocks with a hand lens, and then we identify or we differentiate whether it's a sedimentary, volcanic, intrusive rock, or whether it has alteration or not, whether it has veining, or or whether it is susceptible to be mineralized at depth. So those are the kind of things that you learn, throughout your education as a geologist, and then throughout your experience. That's some kind of experience that you build up through the many years of working on different mining companies, and then you apply all of that to essentially produce a map with different lithologies. So you create like different polygons with different colors, with sedimentary, igneous, intrusive rocks, and lines representing veins and faults. And ultimately, the faults and veins, what they represent is the permeability or the structural preparation that allow the mineral deposits to occur.
So
And this is what we do.
you're looking for certain kinds of rock packages, alterations, structures, veins, and it sounds like you're using breadcrumbs to lead you to the prize, Jesus.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Eh,
So you're doing that at Panuco and also on Santa Fe now.
Right. We have two teams now. One team of geologists mapping on Panuco, advancing the detail mapping on Panuco project. The Panuco district is a claim block of 7,200 hectares that you know uh, we decided, we or selected as the Panuco district, or we separate out from the rest of the properties. And this is 7,200 hectares. What we are mapping, and what we have completed there is 70% of the area right now. But we have other areas, and we have also deployed another team of geos on Santa Fe, because we want to speed up the mapping and targeting process at Santa Fe, because there's already a small producing mine there in an epithermal vein trending northwest, exactly with the same, strike that to the Napoleon vein that we have in Panuco.
Well, that gets me back to what we talked about a little bit with Ermitaño up near Las Chispas, and there's a cluster of epithermal veins. Well, it looks like a cluster at Ermitaño. Then you go about 20 kilometers or so up the road, and you've got Las Chispas. And I actually know about a project that's just to the north of that, that I'll talk to you offline about that, Jesus. But what I've brought up here, folks, is the map from the news release. And we've talked about Copala, and here is the surface expression, not expression, sorry, the surface model of the Copala vein. And then look at all of these other veins that are around here. You got El Molino, Highway 4, San Peter, San Jack, La Luisa, Cuatro de Mayo, Cruz Negra, intersection Napoleon and Colorado. That's what we were talking about, where the structures come together. Is that correct, Jesus?
That's exactly right. Yes. And
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 this,
I would like,
sorry,
if you allow me, I also would like to emphasize that we have been talking about, this uh, center or epicenter of veins, which is also the cluster of veins that you see within the purple circle there.
right
So
here.
that cluster of veins is what contains 98% of the mineral resource. Um,
Wow. And this only because you see in light green back here, folks, this is the claim blocks. and it goes way off the picture here. What do you think this represents of the overall claim block? 10%, 15%, something like that?
what we have drilled now at this point of the known veins that we have discovered through mapping, through historical reports that we have gathered through time is 30% of the veins. So
Wow.
only 30% of the known veins have been drilled
Have
within
been,
Panama.
and that can't even calculate the potential for blind veins.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're just talking about what comes to the surface and you can walk on and see, right?
Right. That's correct.
Um, I want to be respectful of your time, Jesus. How are you doing for time? I could talk to you for a couple hours about this stuff, but you got a little more time for us, or?
I got a little
Okay.
more time. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's such a fantastic story, Jesus, and you're really helping my audience to learn not just about Vizsla, but about exploration. And I really appreciate that because you know, the investors they don't always understand all this, and it's a chance for us to talk about it. And I really appreciate your time helping me to educate the audience. So you figure you guys okay? So here is the main area and sort of the greater cluster, if you will. But then we haven't even talked about this yet. This is a whole nother area where, and folks, when you see surface samples, the ermitaño that we talked about earlier is really important to keep into context because I find sometimes, Jesus, that people will see, let's say, 0 to 50 grams silver equivalent in a surface sample or 50 to 100, and they don't get very excited about that. But as a geologist, tell us why that's exciting.
Well, no, that's really exciting because finding evidences, clear evidences of silver right on surface, of that kind of anomaly, as you mentioned, up to 50 grams per ton, is really exciting because that's we as geologists, what we think is that this silver anomaly is here because is here right on surface because it's coming from somewhere else, and that somewhere else is from deeper levels. And what we immediately think as geologists, well, if we have 50 grams here on surface, then we can have 200 or 300 50 meters down below, or 150 meters.
Well, and what Jesus is describing there is that these epithermal veins, they have zonation of grade as you go deeper. So, for example, above what you're ultimately looking for in an epithermal vein is the boiling zone. And this is sometimes called the bonanza zone. And what that is that's where it's got the perfect temperature, the perfect pressure to have an important deposit. But oftentimes above that, you'll get into a breccia unit. Okay. And so this is where the quartz is making its way and it's into broken rock. And so when you send that off for sampling, you have to be aware that you're getting a mixture of quartz and the country rock in this broken up unit called the breccia. Okay. And so it's diluting the grade because the gold or silver in an epithermal is all in the quartz. Okay. So you said you don't get to just send in the quartz from a breccia unit. You got to send it all in. And so you might just get sniffs of gold and silver. But that doesn't mean that there's not an exciting boiling zone just below that, maybe 50 or 100 meters. Is that correct, Jesus?
That's right, and this is exactly what happened to us in Napoleon Zone, what we call El Gallinero. It's kind of in the middle of the Napoleon vein. I don't know if you can point that out. That's the long vein down there is Napoleon with the
Oh, here.
kind of northwest trending right, and kind of in the center, you can see probably some anomalous sample right in surface. Well, almost pretty much there at the kind of center of this Napoleon vein,
Yeah,
we have a very subtle expression of Napoleon, like a 50 centimeter, 60 centimeter wide vein with 150, 200 grams silver on surface, which is nothing for for artisanal miners or for small miners in the region.
yeah,
200 grams is not economic for them. And we sampled this, but we decided to drill in exactly 80 meters, 100 meters below surface. We intercepted 7 meter wide vein with
ay, ay,
you
ay.
know several hundred grams silver and multi-gram gold. And what it actually developed is it's a high grade shoot which contains over 13 million ounces silver just on
Oh,
that shoot.
wow. So what is also interesting about these epithermal veins is, you know how I did my hand waving there of how they pinch and swell at depth. They also pinch and swell at the surface, and they can be kind of like a wave on the surface. So if you get where it dips down and then comes back up, you can actually see, okay, well, here's the vein here, and we move over 150. But that doesn't mean the vein has disappeared, correct, Jesus?
Exactly. No, it doesn't mean it will disappear.
And that's a perfect example of why you want to drill underneath it. Um, so yeah, I would love to go into all of these details with you, Jesus, but I also want to be respectful of your time. I think so. I'm going to go back to this map, and what I would emphasize off of this is what how they're looking at this core area very closely, starting to move outbound from that. They've got other clusters like this one over here, and we could even go way off the map because the claims go and there's more of these, right, Jesus? You just guys
That
haven't got to them yet.
that's exactly right. Yeah. And
Wow.
that's one of our primary areas to continue testing on the northeast, because that's also where we think there's potential for the block, the volcanic rock, to be downdrop, and we think it is preserving naturally mineralization from erosion, and there's additional potential for blind veins as we have been discussing.
Wow. You know, it's an incredible project, Jesus, and there could be more of those incredible ones. How far is Santa Fe to the south?
Is the Santa Fe mine is 21 kilometer southeast from Copala.
Wow. And then
But
you've
you can
got a,
follow, yeah, but you can follow all the, you know, lineaments, structural lineaments on faults, northwest trending faults from Napoleon, Copala, south to Santa Fe, very clearly.
wow. So they could all be related, cousins or
Could
brothers.
be different centers. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know yet. But what we know, I think the most important is that there's silver gold mineralization 21 kilometers south from
Holy
Copala.
moly. And that again, we go back to Ermitaño and Las Chispas. I mean, Las Chispas was a wonderful mine. It's got Silvercrest bought out. And then 20 kilometers or so is the Ermitaño, which is one of First Majestic's best mines. So the whole district and all your claims are wide open for exploration.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing, Jesus. It really gives me goosebumps to hear all this great information, and you've been wonderful at helping my audience that are not geologists and the geologists understand more of the prospectivity of the ground at Panuco, Panuco East, to the south, to the north. You guys have got it all covered there.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And
Pleasure to be.
you also mentioned something that I think I want to leave on, which is that the company is well financed. The company has a couple $100 million in the bank, which represents about 20% of your market value.
Yeah,
And, folks, that doesn't happen by accident. That is a direct reflection of the quality of the Panuco project and the quality of the team that's involved, including Jesus. And you got a great mine builder in Simon Smirlik, who helped build the Las Chispas mine that we've been talking about. So it's quite a combination you guys have there on your team, Jesus. It must be fun coming into work every day.
yeah, no, it is. It is really exciting. Really, all there's always something really interesting and exciting at work
So
every
I
day.
have one final question for you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Did you ever think when you started your career in exploration that you'd find something like this?
No, not really. No, no. This is something that doesn't happen to many people in the industry, and honestly, I never thought I would be involved in this kind of success.
Well, you've been blessed by Dios above,
Yeah.
and keep on doing that great work, Jesus. Good on you. I know you've been studying epithermal veins for your whole career. I think, if I'm correct, you also wrote a paper on it. Is that
Yeah, geochronology and yeah, and on Fresnillo and epithermal mineralization as well.
well? I'm a geek for that kind of information, so you'll have to make sure and send it off to me, Jesus.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, of
Well,
course.
you're doing a heck of a job there, and I believe that Vizsla shareholders are in good hands with you and the team.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
folks, I could talk to guys like Jesus for hours about this sort of stuff. It's especially on a phenomenal project like Vizsla Silver has at Panuco and possibly at Santa Fe as well. And but we have to be respectful of everybody's time. I want you to know that I don't make buying or selling recommendations. My shows are for information purposes only. On the disclosure side of things, Vizsla Silver is kind sponsor of my work, so it helps me to be able to present information about their company, and it also helps me do my work to be able to put my reports out there. So I'm appreciative of that, but I try to keep it, whether it's a sponsor or not sponsor, I try to keep it focused on the project and what the truth machine is telling and the geophysics and the geochemistry. And so do your homework, speak with your financial advisors. Jesus, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan. It's been a pleasure talking
We'll
to you
have to
today.
do this again in the future.
Of course.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. You have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.